All right, the third video in the series brings us to complex deals. These are not deals I'd necessarily recommend to start out. Some of them I wouldn't recommend to anybody ever. Also, some of them, I've got colleagues that this is their primary mode for income. So you can definitely get good at them, but you have to specialize and be willing to really take a header. Let's move into wholesale deals. A wholesale deal, by definition, is an off-market property marketed through Craigslist, Facebook Marketplace, Facebook forums, your local real estate investment association. The people that are listing these properties are unlicensed real estate agents. That also means they're not following any ethics requirements. And when you complain to the Division of Real Estate and say, hey, this guy without a real estate license screwed me, they're going to point back to you chose to do business with somebody who's unlicensed. What your wholesaler's doing is preying on uninformed, easily swayed sellers and buyers that don't know what they're buying. So on the seller's side, they're trying to get a hold of grandma, try to get grandma to trust them, and then they want to list grandma's house. Grandma's house may be worth $100,000. They're going to try to get grandma's house under contract for 40, 45, 50, whatever they can get grandma to agree to. And then they're going to have grandma sign their fancy contract. We'll get onto that in a sec. They're going to then try to find buyers. And they're going to try to find, California buyers, people that don't know the town, people that don't know the neighborhoods. And they're going to try to get them to agree to $130,000, $150,000. And then they're going to do a double closing. They're going to close grandma at the beginning of the day, and they're going to immediately then close to you later in the afternoon. If it is done properly, then the seller knows that there is a wholesaler trying to market their deal. And then if the buyer is intelligent, the buyer knows that they're buying the property with a margin in effect. Let's go through the standards. You are going to be paying the closing costs. You're also going to be paying any commission. If you have us represent you to buy a wholesale deal, plan on coming out of pocket several $1,000s. Additionally, you will find these wholesalers where they offer inspections and a pre-inspection report. They're done by some dude who's willing to walk deals for these guys. They have no licensing, they have no certifications, and you have no guarantee that they did not, they didn't miss something. You need to do your own inspection. You're always going to find us recommending that. They're also going to be giving you a purchase agreement that is not the state of Ohio purchase agreement. It's going to be their own custom little version, and they're also not going to have a lead disclosure agreement. They're not going to have a property disclosure agreement. So if you close the property and you find out that there's an active lead abatement, again, you can complain to the Division of Real Estate, but they're going to remind you that if you had used a proper sale and a proper title company and a proper real estate agent with buyers and sellers and documents, you would have had a lot more capability. Now, how many deals have I personally closed with wholesalers? I have moved over 100 transactions personally, and I would say I'm probably still less than 5 that have been with wholesalers. I've probably looked at 50, and they're like a 1 in 100 chance of it actually working out. I just had a property that was under contract with a wholesaler, and the price was great, the terms were great. We moved it to a title company. I made sure that was all legit. And then the wholesaler couldn't close the deal. I'm gathering they weren't able to buy the property for that 8 a.m. close with grandma in order to sell to me later in the day. So wholesale deals, in my opinion, are there's much more hype on them than in reality. Let's move on to sheriff sales. So a sheriff's sale is the steps of the courthouse. It's really kind of a dramatic event. Monthly or quarterly is what happens here in Lucas County, Ohio. You have a list of properties that are headed into the sheriff's sale. And this would be the example where I have several colleagues in my investment association that frequent these. They love them. They're obsessed with them. They do flips with them. It's just gamier than I personally transact in. You can't walk the house. You actually can't disturb the property before the sheriff's sale. So you're buying a property, you don't know what the interior looks like. I do have a lot of experience in that, in not doing that, right? I have a lot of experience in getting into the house and realizing how bad it is inside. And then you may have to evict the residents that live there after you own it. It can be reversed. The mortgage holder has a right of rescission. So even if you do all this work and get the property and you get it organized, it can still be undone before you actually get it. And then the last is you end up with variable closing costs. You have taxes, liens, you have property taxes, you have some liens that may exist, you have water bills that exist. And so you don't bid on the property knowing exactly what your total price is. All of that is variable and adjustable and is a pest. The last I would say on the sheriff sales is you have a risk of vandalism. You have people that are losing their homes. They're not going to be able to get a hold of them. So it is definitely a facet. Let's move on down to foreclosures. That I can speak on implicitly. Think about the Great Recession. My experience and my wealth was made during that 2009 to 2014 timeframe. We do still have foreclosures on the market. They're still available. There are definitely deals to be had. And I think we're going to start there. Like, that is the OMG. Like, why mess around with a foreclosure? It's because that property is being offered at a massive discount. That said, you're going to begin at the top. The mortgage holder has no property disclosure to give you. So it will be marketed as is, and it's going to be marketed with a property disclosure that says, don't know, don't know, don't know, don't know, don't know. So that isn't useful. Also, if the bank finds out later that there was a lead abatement event that the health department knew about, but the bank didn't know about, you're still stuck. I don't think you would even be able to undo the sale. I've never hit that personally. Definitely when you do your home inspection, that every agent, myself, my team included, should be recommending, when you do the home inspection, don't expect any repairs. Also, don't necessarily expect reductions. If you find something and you are 100% comfortable to walk away if they won't give you the reduction, then go ahead and do it. I think the example on that would be if you have some proof that the sewer lines collapsed, and your inspection found that nobody knew about that problem until you have found it. You can either demand a decrease or you just walk away. But you need to keep in mind that you're going to deal with a faceless, like, mortgage approval person who is trying to get rid of these assets. So they don't truly care about your inspection report. They also don't want to deal with a whole bunch of paperwork. The last is you are dealing with a property that is vacant. This is kind of interesting. They're typically vacant for at least 1 year, and the property may have frozen. What you will definitely find is they will winterize the property, and so we may have a listing in April, and it was winterized in January of that same year, right? That winter. Did the property vacate an entire year before that? Definitely in the 2008, 2014 range. We saw that all the time. I would hope in today's world that we shouldn't have multiple year vacancies, but who knows? It's a foreclosure, you don't know. The last would be when you take a home and you leave it vacant, even during warm weather, but you're not using the plumbing. You're not using the drains. You run a risk of the water line, which may have been holding pressure when it was constantly being used. It will collapse in the front yard. You're not going to learn about that artesian well you've just created until you buy the house, close the house, and activate everything. And then the additional would be the drain lines. Once you take the slime layer in a sewer, you dry that out, it flakes. And then as you begin using that drain, flushing TP down, it gets caught on that, and then you have an obstruction. That one's pretty easy, that you just proactively get the drain running, proactively clean the drain before we put tenants in there. The big one, however, is if you auger the drain, and then it's called the knife, the auger blade they're using. If that comes back with mud on it, you've got a collapsed sewer line, and now you're looking at $3,000 to $10,000, something in that range. That is the foreclosure cadence. I have transacted in dozens and dozens and dozens of foreclosures. They're great deals. You command a discount as a result. They're on the market for very short periods of time, but you just have to know the shortcomings that come along with the seller of the property not actually being the one to inhabit or have any knowledge of the property. Very interesting, very useful. Definitely foreclosures are the preference between the wholesale, the sheriff sale, and the foreclosures. I'm not opposed to sheriff sales. However, there's just a large, like, pig in a poke factor, buying a pig in a poke, that you have to be aware of and concerned of. That said, Thank you as always for your interest and your investments here in Toledo, Ohio, and with entrusting LaPlante Real Estate with your portfolio. I will follow up in the last video in this series, which is going to be the procedure of auctions and how they function.